Hey trainers, and welcome back to another episode of the Soundproof podcast, or as we like to call it, Soundproof. My name is Brendan Lewis, and I am joined, as per usual, by my partner in crime, Jake Muller. And in case you don't know by now, on the internet we go by Mr. B-Dog46 and Major Bowman. Jake, welcome back to my podcast. It's great to have you on this week. Anyway, we are back with our bi-weekly episodes, at least for this episode. We'll see whether or not we pump another one out in 2 weeks, because we're trying our best here. We're trying our best.
We really are.
We're really trying our best. But we're kind of back on to our regular schedule here after we had the opportunity and privilege, I would say, to pump out what we thought was a really good episode last week with Shocky and Gabby. And so we've got our regular, beginning of the podcast segments this week, and then we've got a really exciting guest for the second half of the episode in Jeremy Odena, who will be joining us to talk about the Players' Cup this week, Jake.
Yeah, it's exciting. Jeremy has already qualified for Phase 3, I guess, 2, like if you count the SE as one. The second weekend of the bracket, let's say that
the round of 64,
objectively accurate. There we go. Right. So he went 3-0 in the first weekend, so he's doing pretty well so far. So he has a pretty good perspective, and he's a great player in general. So we're really excited to have him on.
Definitely. But without further ado, we will dive into our review of the Pokédex as we go on through our podcast here. And to make up for the fact that we were focused on more important things in episode 21, we will be doubling down this week on the Dash 21 and Dash 22 Pokemon. So
double the content.
Double the Pokemon in this week's
double
episode.
The Pokemon and really no more fun.
Yeah, it's like an average amount of fun. We've taken the amount of fun usually in just one set of Pokemon and spread it out equally among twice the number. Alright, so we'll start with 21 and 22, which for our purposes here I'm going to lump together, as they are both Spearow and Fearow.
Imagine being a bad Route 1 bird Pokemon.
And then having to evolve into Fearow.
Yeah, and still being not the best bad Route 1 bird Pokemon in your game because Pidgey exists. They just made it entirely redundant.
I never thought of it that way. Spearow was always one of those kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Ignominious Pokemon. Because it's one of those Gen 1 Pokemons that is literally just named for what it is, like Seal. It's just Sparrow. Except there's an E.
That's true.
There are a couple others that I can't think of, but Seal is the primary offender. But Spearow's not cute, so it doesn't get a pass like Seal does. I think Fearow is it was known as one of the only ground types or flying types to get a ground move for a long time when it got Drill Run.
Yeah, true.
Everything had Mud Slap for a little while, but Drill Run was its claim to fame, which is not a good claim to fame. Anyway, 121 is Starmie, which is a Pokemon that I don't care for, but I know that a lot of people really like it.
I mean, I don't really mind. I think it's okay. I like it because it's kind of nostalgic from the very beginning of the anime when Misty was one of the main characters, and that was one of her signature Pokemon. But otherwise, I think it's okay. It's fine.
Yeah. Does it have expanding force now? I guess that's something to consider.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure it does.
The distribution for that is actually pretty wide. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
And then 122, our last Gen 1 Pokemon of the week is Mr. Mime.
It's kind of forgettable for me. It's never been super relevant competitively, in any generation really.
It's got it's always had kind of an interesting place in the anime, where it was kind of
true, yeah.
Ash's, and he apparently has one in the new season of in the Sword Shield anime. He
really?
he actually has a Mr. Mime, which is kind of interesting. Yeah. After all those years of just getting cameos from his mom's Mr. Mime.
Yeah.
Going into Gen 2 here this week, we have it's Piloswine, right? In my head I say Piloswine, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be
Oh,
Piloswine.
I've never heard anyone say Piloswine.
Okay. I learned a lot of these Pokemon when I was like 9, so you'll have
Yeah.
to excuse that I've just been using the same pronunciation for 20 years.
Piloswine is funny to me because of its eyes. Like when its little like flaps go up and you can actually see its eyes, they look like so out of place. And
Yeah,
there's those little like two black dots under its fur. It's kind of jarring.
it does, yeah, when it uses its attack animation. Also, I have like a similar thought as far as Swinub's eyes. We probably talked about this, but it was like a month and a half ago, and we talked about Swinub. But for a long time, I thought its nose were its eyes, and like I can't really like explain anything more about it. But if you just go look at a picture of Swinub and you try to focus really hard on its nose being its eyes, it's like this really funny looking Pokemon.
Yeah.
Anyway, 222 for the week is Corsola, which recently got a Galarian form and an evolution,
Yeah.
which was kind of exciting for Corsola, but also very sad for Corsola, which has suffered the effects of global warming.
I've always liked Corsola. Whenever I was playing through the Gen 2 games, it's one of the ones I would like always make sure I caught.
Hmm.
Always make sure I caught.
You had the right. You had the right.
Okay, cool. It's just fun. I like its design. I think it's cool that it's like a coral based Pokemon.
Hmm.
I think if they hadn't have given it, I don't. Grammar's not my strong suit today. If they didn't give it Regenerator when that was an option, I think that would have been a crime, and thankfully they did. But
Hmm.
I think it's cool. I like it.
Yeah, it's a Pokemon that both in Gen 2 and Gen 3. First of all, it is one of those Pokemon, and we've definitely talked about this on this podcast before, where it's like a Gen 2 Pokemon, like Slugma. Like it's a Gen 2
Yeah.
Pokemon, but you associate it very heavily with Gen 3 because it was like hard to find in Gold and Silver or something like that. I feel pretty strongly about that way about Corsola, except also it's really hard to find in Gen 3.
I think I don't know how I think I accidentally found one time on like a
Yeah.
very early playthrough because I always knew you had to fish in Cyanwood City to get Corsola,
Right,
and that's
right, right.
yeah.
But
Actually,
it's
also Corsola is one of the most like besieged Pokemon in the lore because
oh
you
yeah,
mentioned like the global warming thing
yeah.
for Galarian Corsola, and then in like Gen 7, what is it like Toxapex like feeds on
Just
Corsola or
eats
something
it.
like that? Yeah.
They didn't pull any punches in the next entry. They were just like, you can find bits of Corsola on the seafloor. Like, what the hell is that? Poor Corsola. Oh, God. Anyway, we're going to jump into Gen 3 now with 321, which is Wailord. Which is, of course, that Pokemon that is like comically big and everybody knows it. And they finally did it justice in the Crown Tundra, or not the Crown Tundra, the
Isle of
Isle of
Armor.
Armor, where you can
Yeah.
like have it behind you and it's just like massive and following you. And
The first time I played Isle of Armor, I was like I was like riding my bike on the water out front of the dojo or whatever, and there's just a big ass Wailord chilling out in the bay, and I went over to fight it, and it was level 80,
What?
and it's just like sitting out there. Yeah,
That's a big,
they,
that's a big
they made it
boy.
like massive in the overworld in the bay too, which is pretty funny.
Yeah, Wailord's cool. That's one of the Pokemon that I always used to like to play in Gen 3 if I wasn't starting with the water starter.
Hmm.
Um, anyway, 322. Speaking of Pokemon that I liked to play if I wasn't starting with X-type starter, is Numel, which I don't feel strongly towards. it's
I don't
it's like
either. Like
it's
it's
like fine
fine.
to use in a playthrough, but like it's whatever. Camerupt is cool though.
I was gonna say I like Camerupt a lot. We can save that for next week, but
Hmm.
Numel's like fine. It's
Hmm.
whatever.
Yeah, I feel the same. Into Gen 4 with 421 and 422, the first of which is Cherim, which is another Pokemon that I feel virtually nothing towards, and honestly, I like kind of dislike it because it's one of those meme Pokemon that memers use on their meme teams when they want to play stuff with Sun.
Yeah.
And it's really annoying because I always like underestimate the amount of damage it does, and then I get cleaned by Helping Hand Flare Blitz from a Ninetales or something like that.
Cherim is a Pokemon that like got the perfect amount of buffs to make it relevant in Pokemon Go at various points too,
Mhm.
and it's like really annoying. And I don't respect it. Like I don't think it's good at all. But like you have to respect it, or else
Right.
you're just gonna lose to it. And so that makes me angry. I don't like Cherim because of that.
And Cherim, the other thing I always think about with Cherim is around the time that what was it, Gen 6, when they were coming out with like Gen 7 games and people were speculating and like theory modding um like what the next crew of megas was going to be before we found out that Game Freak was done with them.
Yeah.
Is everybody and their brother was like, we need a grass fire Cherrim. Like it was like the most popular. Like there are so many fan arts of grass fire Mega Cherrim. It was just like this collective hive mind that we needed grass fire Cherrim. Anyway, that's kind of like neither here nor there. But 422 is Shellos, and I got to tell you, I have felt nothing towards some Pokemon before, and Shellos just like I just don't even think about it. I don't like it exists, and that's it.
I actually really like Shellos.
Mm.
Like Gen 4 is my favorite gen, and whenever I play through, I usually pick up a Gastrodon, and so I always have a Shellos at some point too. I think it's cute. I feel very strongly about the blue one being cuter than the pink one. That applies to both Shellos and Gastrodon, and if you disagree with me, I'm sorry, but you're just incorrect.
I'm pretty sure that's fact. Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah, exactly.
are there people that actually stand the pink Gastrodon?
There are. They do exist.
Really?
I'm surprised they out themselves, but they do exist.
Wow. What a bad opinion. That's rough. Wow, I'm sorry for those people. Um, 521 as we jump into Gen 5 here is Unpheasant. I'm glad we got to feature a couple of forgettable early route birds this week.
Yeah, that's something I just never have thought about unless forced to.
I feel like I learned more recently than I should have that there were multiple unpheasant forms.
Well, it's just male and female.
Right, but they look very different. Um, so I just like I didn't even know that the male and the female looked different until like
Oh,
it's like relatively recent. Just because it
yeah.
was like it's like you don't see it that much when you play through the game, and it's very I don't know. I didn't play
Did
Gen
you know that
5 more than
Milotic has
once,
male
but
and female forms?
I did know that, but I couldn't tell you what the difference is, to be honest with
It's
you.
just the length of its little like tail, not tail, like
Oh,
the
it's like ear tails.
banners. Yeah, yeah.
It's ear tails.
We all know what we mean.
All right, and 522 is Blitzel, which I think is cool.
It's a cutie.
I
Yeah.
think Blitzel is kind of neat. I always think about Blitzel because I was playing. Oh, I forget what it was. It was some ROM hack at some point that was like a Gen, like it used like the Gen 3 engine and injected
Uh-huh.
all like the Gen 5 Pokemon into it. And for whatever reason, the carryover, like Blitzel was just like stupid strong for whatever reason. It was just like one of the best Pokemon in the game for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah.
That's what I always think about. 621. You may have heard of forgettable early route birds, but can I interest you in forgettable random dragon types? Is Druddigan. And I don't have a strong affinity to Gen 5 as it is, but holy moly, could I do without Druddigan?
Yeah, it's just unfortunate. Like it's a cool design, but beyond that, it just falls flat.
Is it a
Especially
cool
because you have
design though?
Haxorus in the
Is
same gen, which is like ostensibly a much cooler design and like just straight up better in like battles and stuff. So
I wouldn't even go as far as to call Druddigan a cool design. That's high
I mean,
praise.
I like it personally.
Okay.
We don't have to agree on that.
You're allowed. You're allowed. And 622 is Golett, which I think is kind of cool. It's I think that's I know a lot of people think that that's a really cool evolutionary line, Gol and Golurk.
Hmm.
Like the typing is cool, the theory is cool. It just like isn't good because its stats are like whatever. Like
Yeah.
like it has like abilities that should theoretically be good. It has most of the moves that it will want, but it just doesn't have the stats.
Yeah. My favorite. Well, I guess that's a Golurk thing. Never mind. We'll talk about that next week.
I was about to talk about the Golurk thing. I wonder if we're thinking about the same thing. I guess we'll have to talk about it next time.
Ooh,
But
suspense.
721 is Volcanion. We're gonna get a mythical this week, which is kind of cool. And my favorite Volcanion story is at some point it was on the VGC ladder in it must have been early 2019 or something like that when Volcanion was like accidentally allowed on the VGC ladder for like 2 hours or something like that,
Yeah.
and I won a
Uh-huh.
showdown tour during that time with Volcanion, and people were like losing their minds. It was so funny. No Volcanion adages for us today, Jake. Okay. At the
I mean,
720,
I feel like entirely neutrally about Volcanion. I think it's okay.
I thought you would have more to say about it because it's like a thing in DOU.
Yeah, I mean it's good. It's a good mon in like Gen 6 and 7 DOU, but like there are a lot of good mons that I just don't feel anything about, so
Fair enough.
it's fine.
Fair enough. 722, and we're gonna do a big gear shift here, as Volcanion is actually the last Pokemon in the Gen 6 decks, as we jump over to Rowlet in 722. And Rowlet is one of those Pokemon with very outspoken stands on Twitter.
Yeah. Rowlet, I think I'm pretty sure it was the one I picked first. No, I did Poplio first, and then I did Rowlet for my second one.
Mm.
But I like both of them. Rowlet itself is pretty cool. I think it's really cute. I like the whole line of the owls and their different stages and stuff. So I'm a fan. It's a little like round body, kind of rolls around everywhere.
Yeah, it is cute. I don't feel like overwhelmingly strongly towards it like a lot of people do. Like it has a lot of fans, especially because I like Poplio like 100 times better than Rowlet. But
Right.
that's neither here nor there. And then for 821 and 822, we have Rookity and Corvisquire.
Yeah. Yeah.
Meh.
Yeah. Like Corviknight's cool. We'll get to him next week, but I would file these two under the Mad Route 1 birds as much as I would like Spearow and Pharaoh, honestly.
Well, I think they're a little bit better than that.
Like maybe.
Their typing
I
is
guess
different.
I like the thematic idea of like the Rook and the Squire and the Knight as far as like medieval English feudalism goes. I think that makes sense with the whole England theme of
Yeah.
Galar. So I guess
Yeah,
I'll give him style points for that.
And I think that this typing is neat and mirror armor is neat, although I guess they don't get that until their final evolution. But it feels a little bit more like the devs were actually like trying to differentiate their early route birds,
Right.
which is nice. Like they threw Unfezant in the garbage can, and then look like Talonflame is okay, and then well Talonflame's pretty cool I guess. What's the Gen 7?
Gen 7 bird.
Alola,
Oh God.
right?
What
Oh,
is
it's
it?
um
Oh, the toucanon.
oh, right. Pick a peck, and the middle one, and two. Yeah, so that one sucks.
Yeah.
But at least looks cool. But I think the point being that they seem to have like actually landed upon an early route bird with competitive relevance, which is something that maybe we would
Right.
have never expected after Talonflame,
Yeah.
and comparing it to the rest of them. But anyway. That's going to wrap it up for this week. Again, same amount of fun, but double the number of Pokemon. So there you go. As we are going to transition into the ladder this week. And as always, I will plug Babiri.net till the day I die. Extremely useful tool for trying to find high ladder teams.
Yeah.
Although the recent updates to Showdown are probably going to gimp it a little bit, where it's like
That's true. Yeah.
it's that much easier to turn off
Spectators.
spectators, yeah, which is kind of a bummer in some respects, but in other respects, like who really cares? So anyway, on the ladder this week, and before we go too far into this, just please be aware, I've been playing very little. And I think Jake has been playing less than I have.
That's not true. I've been playing more recently.
You've been playing VGC? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. When? Why?
Over the last couple weeks, I don't know. I got bored one day and thought I wanted to play VGC again, and I picked it up. And
well,
it was around when Isle of Armor came out is when I started playing again.
Oh, okay. Well, I built a Pikachu team and I've been using that, so that's been fun. But anyway, like there are times when both of us are like playing a little bit more seriously, and I don't think since neither of us are in Players Cup, this is one of those times. So take everything that we say with a grain of salt, as usual. But at number one on the ladder this week is Dragapult, Incineroar, Magnezone, which is seeing an interesting amount of play. I think it's terrible. Amoonguss, Togekiss, and Urshifu. And I think we can't actually tell from this loadout what form of Urshifu
Oh, that's
is.
true. Yeah, we might have to click on the replay.
I would guess that this is the water one.
It is the dark one.
It is the dark one. Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I think there's a couple interesting things, and we'll probably touch on some of these things as we go here. Is that First of all, I don't think Magnezone is good. I like understand why in theory it would be, especially because people are like, oh, we'll give grassy terrain to its 4x boost. Well, guess what? It's not. Nothing is earthquaking you.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna get max quaked, and it doesn't matter.
I don't like Earthquake hasn't really been a move people have used
Like
since like
ever.
Garchomp. Well, like 2017 Garchomp did,
Okay.
and like
Yeah.
Landorus did before that.
But
But
now everything has high horsepower.
right, and like
It,
even Excadrill is not running Earthquake anymore,
right.
and like I don't know. I think Metazone's all right. I think it's better than you give it credit for, but
That's
I
valid.
wouldn't. I wouldn't expect it to be like number one on the ladder. Good.
Yeah, but here we are. It's at number one on the ladder. And then the other thing, and I think is this is kind of interesting, is that Urshifu usage is actually very high right now, and
Hmm.
the knee-jerk reaction to it was not positive. People were kind of like immediately like, "Oh, Urshifu is so bad," especially given that Terrakion is around. And I think people are starting to realize that it's actually quite good. Um,
I like didn't understand the negative reactions at first. Like to
yeah,
me,
neither did
it
I.
always kind of screamed like this is gonna be good. Like not crazy broken good, but like it's like strong. Its ability literally deletes protect. It has two really good signature moves. Like I don't really get why you could think that was bad. Its typing's
Yeah,
not fantastic, but it doesn't hold it back that much.
right. And I think maybe part of it was that there were some people that were hyping it up big time. When we first saw like what Unseen Fist was, people were
Uh
like,
huh.
"Oh my gosh, this is the most broken ability any Pokemon has ever had." And honestly, it's factored into like one game that I've played with Urshifu.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's good, and the usage is starting to reflect it a little bit more. It's
Right.
what, fourth in usage on in the top 100 teams right now. Although that doesn't differentiate the water from the dark one, so
That's true.
it's tough to tell in that regard. Anyway, at number two on the ladder, and this is a team that I was chuckling about the other day, just because you can kind of see exactly what they're doing here. Is a team of Gyarados, Colossal, Amoonguss, Terrakion, Dragapult, and Porygon 2. And it's just like you can look at this team and like see the four distinct modes very
Yeah.
clearly, which is on
It's
the one hand like a good thing to be able to observe going into a game, but also it's scary because they could lead any of these things, and if you don't like guess right, you could just lose the game on turn one.
yeah. You were talking about this team the other day, and like this is quite obviously beat up and surf Dragapult, which I just think is hilarious. Honestly, like that's one of the funniest things I've ever seen,
Yeah.
and it's so funny that you can just like you, like you said, you have to guess, and like a wrong guess probably loses you the game,
Yeah,
unless
oh,
your
it
team is
definitely
like
does.
incredibly bulked out against this kind of thing for whatever reason.
Well, I feel like you're forced to lead redirection into it, right? Like when you see beat up plus
Right.
justified, like unless you are hard reading the lead, you are like forced to lead redirection. And then if they just lead Surf and Colossal, like goodbye to your Togekiss, and like the game's
Yeah.
probably over. I don't
Right.
know. It's tough to deal with. And you can't really like outbulk both of those offense modes at the same
Right.
time, you know. So yeah, that's an interesting team. Don't want to see that. At number three on the ladder is a pretty standard good stuff's looking team with the Ted Core featuring Incineroar. That is an Excadrill, Amoonguss, Togekiss, Tyranitar, and Dragapult. This is, to me, pretty close to as standard as you can get right now.
Yeah. This definitely looks like if you were to take like a standard team, these are 6 months you would probably find on one. It's kind of like the very early format sand teams that we saw a lot of, but if you threw like a Mungus on it, I guess Incineroar too, if we're talking like day one exactly. But like this is pretty normal. Like I don't really have there's not a whole lot to say about it other than it's like good, and that's
Yeah. Oh,
like
it's definitely strong. Yeah,
yeah
definitely strong. And it's at the top of the ladder, so.
yeah
Um, at number four, though, is kind of like a big crackhead energy team.
yeah.
There are a bunch of these teams kind of running around. I think
Hmm.
Male and DD is like one of the biggest crackhead mods in the format.
It
Um,
is, but I also like love it. I think
like
it's really good.
it's very good and it's funny. Like I love it's just like angry, but it's also like round.
Yeah.
Like,
It
it's like
has
an
one of the
angry.
silliest looking models I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's so funny.
Like it's trying so
Um,
hard to be mad, but it just can't.
Yeah, but the team is Whimsicott, Porygon Z, and you can already see where we're going here.
Yeah.
Amoonguss, Togekiss, male Indeedee, and of course Dracovish to round it all out. So it's like very clearly a very like kind of hyper offensive team. There's probably
Yeah.
Imprisoned Trick Room somewhere on there. Amoonguss just to ruin your day a little bit more. Um, but yeah, male Indeedee like Tailwind and Porygon is kind of like one of those like hyper offensive cores that's going around quite a bit right now, and it is absolutely terrifying to play against.
Male Duty does a lot of damage. Like
Does
even without a boosting item, just straight up expanding force hurts, and it's like it's really difficult to play around unless you have like multiple psychic resists.
right?
And when you add like a Dracovish next to it, like there are very few safe switches into something like that.
Right, and we're talking about male Indeedee and Dracovish here just on the assumption that everybody already knows that Porygon Z is going to like ruin your life
Yeah,
with damage.
right.
It
Max
does
Strike
so
is
much damage.
crazy strong.
Yeah, really strong. You thought that those breakneck blitzes were strong. Well, imagine they could use it 3 times.
I was watching a replay, I think yesterday when I was talking to you, Brendan. It was
Yeah.
a team where it was like a mirror Porygon Z lead. They both Dynamax turn one, and one of them just deleted the other immediately.
Yes.
Like, like
That
I don't know what you expected, but
that really embodies the crackhead energy
yeah,
of the team
exactly.
too. All right, the next team on the ladder at number 5, I believe, is just a Fevzy looking paste. I'm pretty sure those are the exact 6 mods that he was using at some point.
Right.
With Lapras, Dusclops, Kinkeldurr, Tyranitar, Mimikyu, and Arcanine. I'm pretty sure that's an exact iteration of one of the versions of the team that he was using.
If it's not an exact one, it's very close. Like that's you look at especially the first four, the Lapras, Dusclops, Conk, Tyranitar, and you think, yeah, that's
Yeah,
fancy.
Yep, definitely. So he probably just whoever this player is probably just smacked Lash Out onto the Tyranitar and like ran with it. But at number 6 on the ladder, something a little bit different looking is a team of Charizard, Hitmontop, Mimikyu, Ferrothorn, and then Whimsicott, Duraludon, which is kind of an interesting combination of Pokemon, but you can like kind of generally see what the idea is.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised to see Charizard without Sun. Like maybe it's
Sunny Day Whim. Yeah.
yeah. But I I wouldn't be surprised if that's like Mach Punch Hitmontop with Weakness Policy Duraludon, something cheesy like that. I get the team, but it doesn't look like it's sturdy enough for my taste. It kind of looks like it falls apart a little too easily.
Yeah. It seems kind of like Hitmontop is like the glue that binds the whole team
Right.
together. To be honest, like I feel like it's doing a lot, and it's also competing pretty heavily with some really good fighting types in the format right now. So not a
Yeah.
huge fan, but you can kind of see what it's going for and how it might be
Right.
good. At number 7 on the ladder, the first Hat and DD team is Hat, Indeedee female, or Shifu. Let's look up which type it is real quick.
It's dark.
It's dark. Okay,
Yeah.
so dark Shifu, and then Braviary, Dusclops, and God, Darmanitan. I hate that thing. The ice
This
one.
is like this is like the two forms of crackhead offense on either
Yeah.
end of the speed spectrum.
Right.
So you have like Indeedee, Dusclops, Hatterene. So you have like
Yep.
Psychic Terrain, Hatterene stuff with Trick Room. And then you have like Braviary, which probably has Tailwind, and Darmanitan, which often runs like Scarf or Band or something. So it's either like going really fast and killing you really quickly, or going really slow and killing you really quickly, but there's no in between.
Right. Yeah, it's really scary. That's another one of those types of teams where like if you guess it wrong, you could just lose turn 1.
Mhm.
Like Darmanitan is going to take 3 KOs and you're going to lose the game, or you're going to get expanding forced into oblivion. But yeah, definitely a scary team to face down in team preview. Number 8 on the ladder is Indeedee female or Shifu, Dracozolt, Corviknight, Gothitelle, and Incineroar. So a couple of like scary fast offense modes. Like
Mhm.
offense plus Gothitelle is always scary. Offense plus Indeedee is always scary, and then kind of a little bit of bulk on the back end to round everything out.
Yeah, I kind of like that. You know, it's a team with some pretty scary immediate offense, but you also have like a bulk mode of Incineroar, Corviknight, Gothitelle, and the Corviknight's probably like bulk up or Iron Defense or something, if I had to guess. But it's interesting. It is darker Shifu, for those
Yeah.
wondering.
I don't
But
personally care for a lot of those Pokemon, but it seems
I
fun.
don't. I've never been a big fan of Dracozolt. I think it just kind of seems like a worse Durant in some respects to me. And I know it has better matchups in some areas, but it's like slower, and I think it has worse coverage with its max moves. But that's neither here nor there, I suppose.
Right. The next team, number 9, is Sun Offense. So here's the Charizard Torkoal stuff alongside Venusaur. That's the darker Shifu. I looked it up. And Mimikyu and Rhyperior. So this is like kind of just like a new or Shifu-centric take on a core that we've been seeing forever and ever.
Yeah, like I don't know. There's not much to say with this. It's
Everybody
kind
knows
of
what it does at
classic
this
Sun,
point.
and then they threw Urshifu on it. Rhyperior hasn't really been around recently, so it's kind of cool to see it back. I don't really know if it's a good idea in a metagame with Rillaboom everywhere, because you just got to get Grassy Glide,
Hmm.
especially because you can't switch the terrain, but I think it's fine. It's alright.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it just is going to be what it is. Like you know the Trick Room mode, you know the Venusaur stuff.
Yeah.
Venusaur will forever to be scary to play against. So, and then the final team at number 10 this week is a team featuring two separate Porygon forms: Porygon 2, Porygon Z, and then Primarina, Incin, Togekiss, and Rillaboom. Those final four, and even if you throw Porygon 2 in there, you can make like a team and then throw anything into the Porygon Z slot, and that's like
Pretty
probably
much.
a good like Fire Water Grass core with a Trick Room mode and some redirection. But this player has opted for Porygon Z in that last slot just to really throw a wrench into what looks like a pretty standard team otherwise.
Yeah. I agree though. The five, not including Porygon Z, is like a pretty solid all around team. It's not just a fire water grass core, but it's a fire water grass starter core, which I
Hmm.
think is kind of funny. It, it's good that we got all three of the Gen 7 starters in there.
Yeah, starters are very popular right now. I was reading something recently about how like there was some sort of like starter loving like lobbyists or
Yeah,
something like
yeah.
before the generation switched or something like that, which is kind of funny and like sort of easy to see as well, given how popular they all are.
You missed my
Uh,
Gen 7 starter joke, Brendan. I'm really disappointed.
and
Rillaboom is
oh,
not a Gen 7 starter.
honestly, it just went over my head. I didn't even, I definitely heard what you were saying, and I was like, "Yep, Gen 7 starters. Yep, that's them." All right, so that's gonna do it for our ladder this week. And to round out the first segment of our episode, we don't really have too many results to go off unless we wanted to start digging through like some of the Rose Tower clashes or whatever the ones that they run on like Tuesdays are that have 9 or 10 participants. So we're just gonna highlight some of the bigger sorts of tournaments that are going on right now. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about the power rankings article, which came out from Play Pokemon recently. And I think those articles are really cool and they're kind of fun to talk about. I know a lot of the chats that we participate in had some discussion sparked by them. And I think it's fine that to kind of have opinions that don't necessarily line up with what is coming out in the articles, and
Right.
if nothing else, it just facilitates good discussion.
Yeah.
Power rankings are kind of like very much geared towards like Americans with short attention spans, and we like to talk about stuff like that. So we'll touch on that first, and then we'll just touch briefly on some of the other tournaments that are happening right now, and where you can find those tournaments, where you can tune into them, and stuff of that nature. So. Let me go ahead and pull up my link here. So, so like we mentioned, basically this version of the article was they put together a top 10 power rankings, and it's not exclusive to Pokemon, but it does feature like some duos. Some of them are solo Pokemon, um, and I think it's kind of an interesting list because you could very easily, with maybe one exception, argue that these are the top 10, quote unquote duos or combinations or forces in the format, so to speak. But I think I would say that I pretty heavily disagree with the order.
Yeah, there's some things in I guess I respect all the 10 things that are on here, but there are some orderings or like placements of individual things with respect to others that I think are kind of wild. Like
Hmm.
number one, I think is one of them. Amoongus is very good. I am a large, heavy. What am I even saying? Oh my god, I'm a huge Amoongus stan. A heavy. I mean, I'm heavy, but I guess that's not really what I wanted to say there. Uh,
Right.
but I've always loved Amoongus. I think it's really good. There's like not a format it's legal in where it's bad, but I one don't really think it should be number one, and two I'm quite kind of surprised it's number one because from what I've been hearing from various circles, I didn't think people thought of Amoongus that highly in general, and
Uh, Yeah, I think I generally agree with that. And it's just kind of like a weird Pokemon to try and rank on a power rankings thing, just because
Yeah,
like it is always gonna be what it is, and there's
yeah,
not gonna be any format that like Amoonguss takes over because it's not that kind of Pokemon. It's more of like it's like a response to certain things. Sleep will always be good, but it's never gonna be like like significantly different in function or like significantly better from
yeah.
one format to the next is kind of my way of thinking about it. It's
Plus,
just
its
like
its whole
it's
thing is like it makes its partners do good things. It's
yeah,
not really winning games on its own. It's allowing its partners to win games. So like it's very good and it's a valuable part of teams for that reason. But I would like having it as a number one, format seems kind of strange to me.
yeah, it's tough, and I guess like in that sense, like it's a historically great support Pokemon, right? So maybe you
Yeah.
could rank it number one, but then depending on like what you value and what kind of list you're making, you could just leave it off entirely. So it's
Right.
kind of a strange Pokemon in that regard. It's like if you want to rank Pokemon, fine, and then you could just like have a Mungus on its own separate list, right? Like here's our top 10, and also
And then we
like
have the Amoonguss here.
number 1B is a Mungus, right? Something like that. And then the next thing on that list, and I think maybe this is the one that I most heavily disagree with, is
Yeah.
Politoed and Kingdra at number two. And this is like it's like an undeniably good. I don't want to say good. It's an undeniably strong and can be a scary core,
Uh
but
huh.
I don't think that it's necessarily as centralizing at number two. Like it's not centralizing enough or good enough to be at number two. I guess is the way I would say it, especially
Yeah.
compared to some of the things that are below it.
Yeah, and like kind of like Among Us, I didn't think people valued rain very much at all right now. Like, I think a lot of the common Pokemon and team archetypes are just naturally kind of good against rain. Like if
Mm,
Rillaboom is kind of a something I mentioned earlier, but like, again, like Rillaboom is just really good against rain in general because you
super
get
good,
Grassy
yeah.
Glide, you resist water stuff. Kingdra does have Hurricane now, so obviously Rillaboom doesn't want to get airstreamed, but uh, I just don't see rain as this good because I don't think rain has ever been like number two on a power ranking good at any time. Like maybe back in
Like
like
2014.
yeah, like 2014 or earlier when we just didn't really have as many tools to deal with rain stuff, and there was much less power creep at that point. Um,
Right.
but like now, like it's always been like good and something to respect, but like not dominating. So
Right.
I'm
And
kind of surprised.
and I think the other thing about having Politoed and Kingdra together is that like historically Ludicolo has always been the better Swift swimmer, and arguably it's still better right now. Is like Kingdra, I don't think is as good as people were kind of hyping it up to be when we
Hmm.
first found out, because you forget sometimes that like sure it benefits from the max moves, but its stats are really bad and it's weak to fairy.
Yeah,
So that's like
it's
it's a
like
tough
barely
place
stronger
to
than
be.
Ludicolo. I think it's like five higher special attack or something,
Yeah.
and you're not really getting much in return because like Dragon is no longer really a great type. Like I would much rather have grass coverage because like you get something to hit waters um,
Hmm.
for more damage, and like I think Ludicolo has better coverage overall. I don't
Yep.
I don't really know if I would call Kingdra better or worse than Ludicolo though. Like
I mean, yeah, part of that argument was just based like historically. It's not like,
yeah,
oh,
that's
Politoed
true.
and Kingdra are back. It's like
Right.
Politoed is back and Politoed still does things. So if you want to put Politoed on this list by itself, first of all, I think that would be a better way to go about it, and
Hmm.
I think it would also be way lower.
Yeah.
Because it's Rain is still does like you take Incineroar out of the game in a lot of
Yeah.
respects. It supports stuff like Rillaboom and Magnezone and Ferrothorn really well, and those Pokemon are all still pretty good. So
Hmm.
anyway, we could talk all day about this. Let's move
I
on to
know.
number three quickly. And at number three, you will find the true king of the format right now in Cinderace, which is
I would have easily put
extremely good
Cinderace at
Pokemon. Yeah.
number one. Like I think Cinderace is crazy good.
Yep.
I am a big fan. It does so much damage. Libero is an incredibly good ability. It doesn't have like the greatest coverage. Like it has four, five, six moves you can reasonably run on it, but like
Right.
the combination of those, even though if you had all six, the coverage isn't like super great. But
Mm.
it gets like the moves you need. So like Airstream, broken. We know that. It gets
Yep.
Steel Spike, which is really good.
Yep.
I think a lot of people run High Jump Kick, which you like. Knuckle kind of sucks, but High Jump Kick kills Cinderace at -1. Or sorry, Incineroar -1 if you're not maxed. So I think that's really useful. There's stuff like Sucker Punch and Pyro Ball is a really good move, especially if you're G-Max because you get the Mold Breaker effect on it.
Right. And then
And
Giga
then
Impact, I
yeah,
think people are running as
hmm
well.
I love
Yeah,
it. I think it's great.
it's just so good. Forget who I was talking to at some point recently that are just like you could easily make an argument that Cinderace is the best fire type, best flying type, and best fighting type in the format right now, which it's like is an entirely like plausible argument.
Yeah, that's
It's just
funny.
like it's so difficult to deal with, and I feel like all of my team, like when I'm team building, the first thing I think of is okay, how am I gonna deal with like a Cinderace redirection lead?
Yeah,
It's kind of like during the Durant portion of the format where you were
right.
like, okay, how am I gonna deal with this like hyper offensive threat that is gonna knock out three Pokemon if I don't stop it? But Cinderace is like that, except it's like stronger and can snowball and arguably has more utility. Like having access to Airstream just makes it like a much different Pokemon
Right.
than Durant in that respect. So yeah, Cinderace is really good. I totally agree with you. That's what I would put at number one. Expanding Force is at number four, which I think I agree with the placement in the top five. It's probably up near number three for me, with Rillaboom being number two. We'll talk about that in a minute. I think Expanding Force I would put in the top three, just because like one of these two Indeedis is on like pretty much every team right now.
Yeah, expanding force is just stupid good. It's like it's base 80, which is like nothing crazy, but in terrain, I forget what the actual math is. I've seen so many different numbers on it, but it gets boosted and it hits both opponents, and it's like I said earlier, it's just really hard to switch into. Like there's not
Right.
many things you can switch into it, and the fact that it's hitting both things most of the time means that it's like going to be making an impact, and especially on something that's not one of the Indeedis. Like the Indeedis don't have great special attack, but like in the article it mentions Hatterene for Trick Room or Alakazam
Hmm.
for a faster like side spam
Which are
option, and both of
both
those are
really
like
strong.
crazy
Yeah.
strong. Yeah,
And also, I think the other thing, and before we move on, is that there are, I alluded to this with Starmie, is that there's like a wide distribution of things that actually get expanding force.
like
And I
most
think
of the
some,
psychic types got it, I think.
yeah, and even some that, like some non psychic types for whatever reason. So I think that there are still some kind of like unexplored niche expanding force users,
Yeah.
like Slowbro,
Mm-hmm.
um, Reuniclus still has a niche. Wigglytuff gets it.
Oh, that's funny.
Don't sleep on Wigglytuff, by the way. So it's just like a lot of different stuff gets it, and I think a lot of those combination, like Executor is something that you could probably make an expanding force user out of with like a
Yeah.
sun support. A lot of those like sorts of things get it that just haven't even been touched yet.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about Terrakion and Whimsicott because I think we know exactly what that does.
I
We know
will say I do think you could have ranked
exactly how to stop
Terrakion.
it.
You could have ranked Terrakion on its own. I think it's just a good mon in its own right.
I agree.
I
Yep.
might be that might not be as popular of an opinion, but I think it's just really solid. When you have beat up next to it, you could have put Dragapult and Terrakion and have gotten the same effect. It's like even crazier, but there are a lot of like reasonable ways to shut that down.
Hmm.
So I don't think I'm glad that it's not any higher than five on this list for
Right.
that reason.
Also,
But yeah,
also a lot of people aren't talking about how good Cobalion is also really strong,
that's
because
because it's
it
not.
gets airstream and it gets steel spike, and you can still beat it up. So it has like better max moves than Terrakion does, and also a really high defense stat. So Terrakion can't really do anything to it. Um, yeah, so Cobalion low key really good also.
Okay.
I'm not even joking. Like I'm really not even joking.
I
I
know you're
actually
not.
think Cobalion is like pretty good. At number six, and this is I think where what I would put at number two is Rillaboom, which is insanely good, thanks to Grassy Surge and to arguably a greater extent Grassy Glide. Both like made it just into an insane force that just like instantly neutered just about every water type that
Right.
exists. It's
I
also one of the best checks to expanding force spam. It's just like everything about it is so good.
This is like I say this as one of the like last lines of defense against people that hate on Tapu Bulu. Like I love Tapu Bulu and I always have and I always will, but Rillaboom is what Tapu Bulu wishes it could have been.
Yeah,
Like
seriously. I just think it just says so much about a Pokemon that it's a grass type physical attacker in a format where Incineroar and Arcanine have been all over the place,
yeah,
that it's still one of the best Pokemon in the format. Like it's insane.
it's so good.
Uh,
Grassy Glide as like a priority base 70 move is insane.
it's
Fake
ridiculous.
out U-turn
And
is really good. Like Grassy Surge is really good. Knockoff
right.
is really good. Like, it's just so many different things. And you can even run like offensive with a wood hammer, high horsepower, that kind of stuff. It has like good solid coverage. It
It's
has a
so
lot of
good.
different options. It has the bulk it needs to like function in that way. It's so
Yep,
good.
it's super good. At number seven, and we spent quite a bit of time talking about this when we went through the ladder, is Urshifu. Um, both forms seem to be pretty good. I really like the water type one, the Rapid Strike, but it seems like the popular one right now is the Dark one because it's so strong and it gets access to Sucker Punch. So you can kind of understand why it would be as good as
hmm
it is. Yeah.
I'm a bit more of a fan of the dark type one myself, but I think the water one's fine too. Like Wicked Blow is slightly stronger than Surging Strikes. Is that what it's
Yep.
called?
Yep.
Yeah. So like that's one reason, and like you said, Sucker Punch is nice too. But
Yeah.
I think they're both solid.
It's fun to just like invalidate Incineroar.
Yeah.
At number eight is Porygon 2, which is another Pokemon that almost falls into the Amoonguss tier, which is like you know exactly what it is, you know
Yeah.
exactly what it's gonna do, but it's just phenomenal at its job.
Yeah, there's not really a whole lot much to say about it. Like, it's a very reliable Pokemon. It's super bulky. It even like it functions well in a Dynamax format, so like that kind of speaks to how bulky it is. And
Right.
it's like it'll stick around for a while. It can do some decent damage. It sets up Trick Room, which is nice for a lot of teams. So all
Definitely. At
reliable.
number nine is Azumarill. Um, I think Azumarill is good. I don't I don't know. I feel like in on this list it was just kind of selected as the stand-in for like bulky water, right? Like offensive-minded
Yeah,
bulky water. Like you could
yeah,
also put like you could make this item on the list like Azumarill slash Primarina slash Lapras or something like that. I
right.
feel like they all function pretty similarly and have their own niche, which is like Azumarill is a physical attacker and gets access to Steel Spike. Primarina is a special attacker, and that's pretty much it. It's a little bit. It gets to do like strong spread damage outside of Dynamax, and then Lapras. Obviously, we know what Resonance does, but they all kind of function similarly. Like right, like you set up Trick Room, and then you bring them in, and you click a whole bunch of max moves. So
Yeah,
Azumarill like is cool. It's good, definitely. But I think that like putting it by itself on this list is more of a disservice to some of the other Pokemon like Primarina that are still extremely good.
yeah. I was surprised to see Azumarill on this list because I like truly haven't seen it at all in the bit that I've been playing, and maybe that's just a function of me not playing at the right times, or me hovering in mid ladder hell. But uh, like when you frame it like that, when you frame it like bulky water in general, I think that is a good place for it. So that makes
Yeah,
sense.
I think it makes a little bit more sense. And then
Yeah.
the last Pokemon on the list is Talonflame. I I feel like we could also just talk about like let's put Tailwind on the list,
Yeah.
right? It's like that's what Talonflame is basically just a Tailwind bot. It's not that good, I don't think, and it's definitely not any better in this format than it was in prior formats.
Yep.
Um, so like you find it on like crackhead hyper offense teams where you, like Talonflame and Male and DD or Talonflame and Porygon Z or
Right.
Talonflame and Dracovish. Like it's just like that kind of Pokemon. It's like as far as I'm concerned, interchangeable with Whimsicott.
Yep.
I don't know.
It's like Whimsicott with a little more offense, which can be useful sometimes.
Right. I don't think it's all that good, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I also like kind of when I was thinking about it, I was like, I don't actually know what I would put at number 10 on this list.
I don't
Um,
either.
like Togekiss.
Yeah, I
Uh,
guess.
like you could put Porygon Z up there. I don't know. If you want to split things up, you could put like Hatterene up there, which I don't know. Dusclops.
Yeah.
Some of the old favorites kind of got left behind, but anyway, that's the list. I think it's interesting. It's always interesting. It spurs a lot of discussion. You don't have to agree with it, um, but it's kind of cool to talk about. Um, all right, so let's change gears again here. I know we talked about we were going to just kind of mention some of the other tournaments that are going on right now for anybody that's looking for some VGC action,
Woo.
whether it be over the weekend or over the next couple of weeks. I think the first one we'd be remiss in if we didn't go here first is that the Players' Cup,
Yeah.
of course, is the only quote unquote official VGC stuff that is happening right now. It's actually streaming live as we're recording this,
Yeah.
so that's not really helpful for anybody other than ourselves. But they do have a regular stream schedule. I think the round of 64 is due to be played this weekend.
Yep.
So good luck to anybody that's participating in that, and most luck to Jeremy because he's appearing on our podcast this week. And then they kind of like pre-select and pre-record matches and then cast over them.
Yeah.
I believe it's the week after the
Right. So
event's
the ones
happening,
they're
correct?
showing tonight are the ones from this past weekend. and it's every Thursday for the next few weeks. We'll have more VGC stuff. So, like today, we're recording this July 16th. So next week on the 23rd, and the week after that on the 30th, there are two more VGC streams at 5 p.m. Eastern, I believe. Oh no, Pacific.
It's
It's
8
Pacific.
p.m. Eastern. Yeah, 8 p.m.
Yeah.
Eastern.
So at 8
Um,
Eastern, 5 Pacific on Thursdays for the rest of July, we get those VGC streams.
mhm, definitely. And then, of course, this is a Victory Road Stan podcast. So we will talk about what they have going on, which is, of course, the European Cup right now, which I've had a lot of fun following. I
Mm-hmm.
think their coverage of it is really cool, where they kind of like pick highlight matches. They record every team that's used along with like the records of the team, so it's a great resource for teams right now.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of cool to follow some of these great players that are kind of like duking it out for their countries in Europe right now. I have to be honest, I am rooting for Team Poland right now.
Why is that?
That's well, I'm a little bit Polish, and
Oh,
also we have a bunch of Poles on that were on Postbook United this year.
nice.
Um, so I'm rooting for Team Poland. I love all the Polish players; they're all great, very nice people. Shout out to Poland. But anyway, their stream schedule, they stream on both Saturday and Sunday just about every weekend. They're in week 3 right now, I believe. And Jake, you're going to have to do this time zone conversion for me. What is CEST?
That's Central European Standard Time. I
So
want to
is that
say
the one
that's. I want to
that's
say
5
that's
hours ahead of me?
+2, so it'd be 6 ahead of you.
I can't do that
Because
math.
I know. Okay, I know England is 6 ahead of me right now, and Central Europe is 1 ahead of them, and you're 1 ahead of me. So it should be 6 ahead of you. I'm pretty sure.
Okay, so that
I want.
means, yeah,
They're GMT +2. I'm pretty sure.
that
So
sounds correct because I'm pretty sure it's always on in the middle of the day, so that would make sense. It's like I get up at 11, it's like our stream is
yeah,
starting soon. It's like, okay, that's good. So yeah, so Eastern time, that would be noon, I guess, is when they start, and it looks
right.
like they have 4 matches a day. And I know that there are also some other outlets that are kind of streaming their matches. Like I know Pdons has been streaming most of his matches. Um, I think Costa has also been streaming some of his matches. So these are like the official stream matches, but there are also some other places to
Mm-hmm.
tune into that. And then the final tournament that I wanted to talk about is the charity tournament that's being hosted by the Pokecasters Network. So the Pokecasters is basically an organization that kind of like I don't know, I guess represents and helps to sort of like publicize a lot of the Pokemon um,
Podcast.
podcasts is the word that I'm looking for. So they have a cool website. They're pretty active on Twitter. They do a lot of like cool events like pretty regularly.
Mm-hmm.
But this one that's happening over the weekend of the 25th and 26th of July is a VGC tournament that they're hosting. And Jake bailed on me, but I will be stepping
I
in to
didn't bail. I
cast
had.
some of
That's the
the.
weekend of Pokemon Go Fest, and as a Pokemon Go disciple, I cannot miss that.
Yeah, so I'm gonna be stepping in to cast some
yeah.
of the matches, I believe in Top Cut alongside Alex Underhill, who is one of the hosts of the Hyper Voice podcast, which I'd expect that everybody that listens to this podcast also has at least some familiarity
Right.
with Hyper Voice as well. Those are like kind of the 2 biggest VGC podcasts right now.
Yeah,
So
it's cool
that's
though.
gonna be
It's a
really
neat event because I think all the proceeds are going towards. It's like what? It's Black Lives Matter and the Children's Miracle Network. Is that the two?
yep, I believe so. Yeah, the Children's Miracle Network and Black Lives Matter. Yep.
Yeah.
So I think they were saying that for every it's $10 entry fee, and 70% of it is going towards charity, and then the other 30% of it is going into the prize pool. And
Cool.
then they also have a whole bunch of other stuff that they're raffling off as well, which is like they have like Worlds backpacks. Like unique Pokemon art that's both being raffled off and being put into the prize pool. Some of this stuff that they have, like they have creators that have made that are really cool looking. So I'm gonna be a part of that, representing Soundproof, and it's obviously for a good cause. So if you feel like you want to play VGC next weekend, there's definitely a good place for that over at the Pokecasters Network, and I believe their website is pokecastersnetwork.com, so you can find any additional information for that tournament over there.
Yeah.
I'm definitely looking forward to that. That'll be a cool one.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so we are going to wrap up the first half of our show here. We're going to be back in just a couple seconds with the second part of our show featuring Jeremy Odena and a pretty in-depth discussion. Of course, we already recorded that part of it. It was a cool discussion with Jeremy. We talk a lot about the Players' Cup, and then Jeremy being one of the prominent Black members of the community, we've also asked him to talk a little bit about, his place in the community, especially kind of as it pertains to some of the stuff that we talked about last week, and allyship and some of his experiences. So we're glad to be able to feature another voice from the VGC community on Soundproof this week. So stay tuned for that. We're going to pop out for just a couple seconds. You can listen to our music, and we will be right back. Hey y'all, and welcome back to the second half of this week's Soundproof episode. And at this time, Jake and I are now joined by our guest of the week. And that guest, of course, as we alluded to, is Jeremy Odena, a local in New England. So Jake's going to be outnumbered this week. We've had a couple New England players on, and we're going to continue to outnumber Jake here as we go. And I'm going to pass off to Jake real quick just to introduce our guest a little bit, and then we'll dive in to our discussion about the Players' Cup.
Yeah, so if you don't know him, Jeremy has quite a few top cuts of regionals to his name, including 2017 Madison and 3 in 2019 Hartford, Richmond, Atlantic City. He made Day 2 at Worlds in 2018, and he won the DC Open in 2019. So quite the accomplished player. Jeremy, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
And you all have to know he has been jonesing to be on this podcast for like the whole year we've been running it.
Dang, had to call me out.
All right, so we did want to have you on this week because we're looking to get a bit of a discussion on the Players' Cup going, which obviously is the biggest thing and only thing happening in VGC right now for all intents and purposes. And you were able to advance to the round of 64 with, what was your record last weekend?
3-0.
You just went clean 3-0 last weekend.
Easy.
So easy 3-0 with the online tournament. So so to get started, obviously this is a tournament that has never been like a tournament that we've never seen anything like it before as far as tournament structure. TPCI trying to do something other than just like international challenges online. So just like the way that the tournament, like, do you think that the tournament in its current iteration, without going into too much detail, is like even a good idea at all? Is this something that you feel like in this day and age, in this time period specifically, is like good for VGC?
Absolutely. I think that TPCI has taken a page out of what we have started as a grassroots, on our own, and they see that we are serious about this game. And I think as time goes on, even like at the start of this generation, that they're really listening to us a lot more. Taking the things that that they see us complain about, putting things in. I think they're looking at the balance of the game, and just the way we like to have tournaments run. And I think that they've done something really good with this, and keeping us interested.
Yeah, I think I generally agree with you. Now, let's say we're in a situation where we're not all locked away in our homes for months on end. Do you think that the tournament structure that they have now is something that can coexist with like a live event circuit, or is it worth it for them to continue to pursue like different types of online tournaments while we also have a live circuit in place?
I think this is the start of something. I don't think that we're going to be able to just jump headfirst back into traveling all over the world for tournaments. And I think they're going to start probably implementing something similar to this, where they have maybe like a weekend regional of some sort. Personally, I wouldn't be a fan just because I don't like sitting in my house all day to play Pokemon.
Right.
My weekends, even sometimes I travel for tournaments, I kind of dread it sometimes. I'm like, man, like this is going to be exhausting. I have to travel in and get in at midnight and have to get up at the crack of dawn. But then on the flip side, if I stay home and have a weekend tournament, then I have to sit in my house on my bed all weekend. So, I think for a lot of people, they will like it. But for me, I'm not a huge fan of it long term.
I think
Right, yeah, you got to pick your poison in that regard.
Right. I think in like a normal world where we do have our in-person circuit back, I think something like this is still viable. I like the idea of using the international challenges as qualifiers, just because that's something that people already play already. You can enter it freely. There's no like restrictions. You can do it from wherever. And I think the way they're setting up Players Cup, where you play like a few rounds each weekend, is fine. I just think it like if you want to keep that exact structure like time wise, play a few matches each weekend for a few weeks. That doesn't really work if there are in-person tournaments those weekends. So you'd have to find a time where you take like a month where there's no regionals or like nationals or something. And I don't know if such a month has existed since they've started splitting up regionals, like not on the same weekend anymore. It's like we used to have like there were some weekends in the past where there were like 4 or 5 regionals in the US in one day. And so then we had those big breaks in between. Now there's probably a regional every 3 or 4 weeks. And so I think they'd have to do some like rescheduling of some things, but I do think something like this is still viable, and I think like it wouldn't be as well attended, so to speak, but it would still get some pretty good interaction.
I feel like it's theoretically viable as long as it's just kind of like planned ahead of time around the regional schedule.
Yeah.
Because there's not like a regional every weekend. It would just have to be spread out over more time. So last question, just kind of as like an overarching umbrella look at this tournament. Do you think it's a good idea to have it assign CP in a world where it exists it coexists with the live tournaments?
I'm not like a huge complainer. I kind of they kind of just whatever they give me, I kind of just take and I play.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't see what's the problem. I think it would put more significance on it. If you're going to have people in their house all weekend, then absolutely, then you need to give us some kind of incentive to do so. On top of that, money. Just because
Money's
you're getting
good.
CP, I don't care. What is 100 CP going to do for me?
Drop the check.
I'm going to get my World's Invite regardless. I don't need the 100 CP that bad. That's not a flex, but it's just...
Isn't it?
It's just, you got to give me something more than just CP.
Yeah, I think it's kind of an interesting question, just in the sense that like, yes, they have awarded CP from an online tournament before, but it's for the IC and it awards so little CP that like, with the exception of niche cases, it's like not always consequential, because it's always like Paul Chua getting 50 CP. So it's not like pushing somebody into actually like getting a World's Invite or anything like that.
Right.
And it seems like they also know that maybe it's not a great idea to be awarding CP through the IC, so they make sure it's always small amounts.
That's what I was gonna say. Like it's like really easy to cheat in ICs or like online tournaments, especially if they're like this spread out. Like if you're only playing 2 or 3 matches a day, it's like really not that hard to get information beforehand, like get in a Discord call with someone as they're playing, blah blah blah. And like that's why I don't really mind the IC giving out CP, just because it's, like you said, usually inconsequential. It's so little. But as soon as you put like bigger CP amounts or bigger monetary prizes into these tournaments, then I think it just evolves into like who has the better ghosting ring or something like that, which I don't really think is something... Personally, I don't think that's a good idea. I would be very surprised if the people running the circuit were unaware or okay with that. So I think that's just something you have to keep in mind.
I think it's a good point. I didn't think about that. I think it's a good point. I just, like I said, I just whatever they say, I just do. Yeah. I'll play. I don't care.
Host the tournament and they will come.
Yeah.
Right.
So talking a little bit more about the structure of the tournament itself, which has had various elements of it be kind of controversial on Twitter. A lot of people were talking about, no-shows and reseedings and everything like that. So, starting from the top, the way that it ended up playing out was, a qualification through the IC. So starting there alone, how do we feel about qualification, based on a best of one kind of like all over the place type of, we all know what the IC ladder looks like.
Right. For me, I never play the IC just because I've already kind of explained that. Like, you have to sit around and play the stressful best of one thing when I could be out doing something else for 50 CP, or I can go to an MSF for it instead. But in this case, like, I really put my best foot forward. Like, I like laddered a lot beforehand and made sure I was ready. Because everybody was kind of hyping it up to be this, you have to get 1700 plus and everything, and it turned out being way lower.
Mhm.
But I think generally speaking, like you have to have some level of skill to at least qualify for something like the Players Cup. And I think being able to ladder generally well shows that.
Mhm.
And I think it's fine. Like what else are they going to do? I'm not sure. You know.
Yeah, I guess like what else are they gonna do is more of like in a hypothetical scenario. I think there was really no other way unless they were gonna do it based on like current CP totals at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
season, and people would have been like knocking down their doors in Seattle if that's what it ended up happening.
Yeah.
So I guess that was kind of like the fairest way to do it. But I think I agree with you. I always felt like, the last couple years where Japan was still had their like best of one qualifying circuit, and everybody was like, oh, they qualified through best of one, like that stuff is hard.
Yeah.
It's not easy to play best of one, and I feel like we're belittling it a little bit. So I agree with you. I think the IC is like totally fine as a qualifier. Although again, I wouldn't like willingly go out of my way to play hours and hours of best of one without a good reason to.
It's really just the most
Absolutely.
fair way, I think. Like you have to start
Mhm.
somewhere where everyone's on an equal playing field, and I like maybe you can come up with some new qualification system, but the IC is just so easy because it's you already have the infrastructure for it. People already know one like how to play in it, two what it entails, and like there's so much experience out there with it already that like you may as well just use it. You don't need to reinvent the wheel there.
Right. Yeah. I totally agree. I think it makes sense. Um, so that's stage one of the tournament, and then ended up going into uh, a double elimination bracket, which I think it sounds cool in theory. But I think there were a lot of people that were talking about, like why would we do double elimination when we could have just played like a couple rounds of Swiss or something like that. So how did you feel about the way that the round of 256 was structured?
I think the no-shows thing was a huge blunder. I don't
Yeah.
understand how that happened. You had
Yep.
people playing one match and getting into the top 64.
Mhm.
Well, meanwhile, I'm playing, the sets of my life, like these insanely intense sets, all day, and some guy gets to waltz right into top 64. So that was frustrating. Like I already kind of got up expecting to play at least 3 matches. So I didn't really think about anybody else. I was
Yeah.
just like, I got to focus on these 3 matches regardless. Um, but the fact that somebody did this get to like wake up and just, pretty much get right in was frustrating. But I was also at the same time totally focused on what I had to do.
Like in
Yeah.
a world where there weren't any no shows, and let's pretend like all 256 people showed up, how do you feel about it being like double elimination from that point?
It kind of feels similarly to X2 Cut
Mm-hmm.
tournaments where you get that kind of that leeway. Okay, you have a loss, and you can afford another one.
Yeah.
And you'll be all right in that sense because it's only 4 matches maximum in top 64. So it kind of feels like that kind of thing where you have some leeway to lose and not just X1 and cut only or something like that.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I think in that sense, there were a couple people on Twitter that were talking about, like, we said as far as the IC that it made sense to make that the qualifier and not reinvent the wheel, but why we ended up, basically going ahead and reinventing the wheel for a double elimination tournament when
Well,
it could have theoretically just been like X1 Swiss or something like
I
that.
don't I don't think this is really reinventing a wheel though. That like we haven't done this in VGC, but this is, I mean, like a normal bracket
We're
structure
esports now.
for yeah for other esports. Like Smash is a good example. Like however you qualify out of your pool and then you're put in a double elimination bracket. I know it's more nuanced than that, but that's like the gist of it. And like
Also, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I'll just like if you're qualifying for the second stage or whatever, I don't really see a point in qualifying for a Swiss tournament. Like I feel like the point of Swiss is to have a bunch of people and kind of narrow down to the top from there. But when we have this qualifying stage and then we put all these other people in this second stage, I think going straight to a bracket makes more sense personally.
Hmm.
But I could be in the
I guess
minority there.
that kind of makes sense, but it also would have been difficult to run like a Swiss tournament with thousands of people online, so it had
Right.
to be whittled down in some
Yeah,
way.
true.
But again, this is purely hypothetical. We're um, as the tournament structure is already in place.
The thing is also, we have to remember that they're experimenting with something that's never been done before, and
Right,
I think they're
yeah.
trying to throw new, test the waters for things they can possibly implement in real life tournaments. Because how long have people been complaining about Swiss matches and I bubbled out, this, that, and the other. I can't control
Right.
my schedule, and maybe this could be something that they try to implement in real life. And a lot of times, most times, people are very resistant to change, and
Yeah.
you never know. Maybe we get this in real life, and we end up liking it. With consistent practice, with this structure.
Right.
Right. I think in real life, I think that's actually something I hadn't even considered, whether or not they want to try and do something like this in real life. I think it's a good idea for people that are like, let's, for lack of a better word, say top players, where you can show up at a tournament and expect to be playing, like 5 or 6 matches,
Hmm.
but it's going to feel really bad for casuals that show up and go 0-2 and then
Yeah.
not only like it's one thing to go 0-2 and then like decide yourself that you want to drop, but it's another thing to show up and go 0-2 and be told that you can't play Pokemon
Right.
anymore when you like traveled all the way out to this
I
regional.
really like Swiss
Um,
for that reason. Like, if you
right,
show up to the tournament, you get to play the whole tournament. Well, the whole
Yeah,
day one or whatever. And I do think that's
yeah,
good. And like, I think the issues that we have with Swiss, like you mentioned, Jeremy, is mostly just bubbling, and that's
right.
easily fixed by just hard X2,
That's
X3
a,
CP, X4 CP,
it's a
whatever you want to say.
conversation for another day.
Yeah.
right. That's very true.
Yeah.
It's a conversation for another day. All right, so let's go back to a world where there are no shows. As far as the way that like you would want to see buys assigned, so there are no shows, but there are still buys based on. So it's an odd number of players. Like there are people that didn't show up, but there are no shows left in the tournament. Just everybody's on the same
Yeah.
page, right? I'm
Right.
just confusing myself here. Okay, how would you feel about like the way that buys are assigned? Is the IC like ranking in the IC a fair way to assign buys, or because it's kind of like a weird best of one ladder, would it make more sense to just do it randomly?
Well, they would have to let that be known ahead of time
I
because
totally
Yeah,
agree.
for sure.
Yep.
yeah, like people aren't going to go. People are going to go for the bare minimum, which most people were
Hmm.
during the IC. So they would have to let that be known ahead of time. It's fine. Like, to me, it's fine. Like they do that in a lot of the Mount Civil weeklies, where if you go X1 or XO, whatever, then you get a first round buy in top cut. Um, I'm for whatever they want to try. If they want to try something new, at the end of the day, you still have to do well.
Right.
You still have to
Right.
win most of your matches. So like, I'm not, like I said, I'm not gonna raise hell over them trying something new and trying. I think they're genuinely trying to answer the things that we complain about consistently.
Hmm.
I kind of think if you have like these IC ratings, like you may as well use them. I mean, okay, it's not. That's a bad way to think about it. You may as well use them, but I think it would make way more sense to use IC ratings to seed a tournament because you do have this like very concrete number or like measurable.
Right.
It's a very concrete measure of success as in like the qualifying stage. So like compared to like Swiss where you have 18 people that go X and 2, it's harder to determine of those 18 like who is the one and who is the 18 because
Hmm.
again like it's all strength of schedule kind of stuff and that's kind of out of your control. But in the IC when you like know your rating the whole time, you can see I am at 1824 and I think there won't be many people on top of me, so I'm just going to stop here. Whereas you could be at like 1670 and think, okay, I'll probably qualify at this, but I might not be, in the upper half or whatever. I think it makes a lot of sense to reward the people that go above and beyond in a case like that. But again, like Jeremy said,
Hmm.
you need to publicize that beforehand for sure.
Right. Because they didn't announce that beforehand, right? And that's what they ended up using for the
I
seeding.
don't know,
I
honestly.
don't think they did.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if I would have tried any harder, but
Yeah.
I know there
Yeah.
would have been people who
Right.
definitely would have.
Yeah.
Right. And I guess it didn't end up mattering because of all the no shows anyway. So people like near the bottom of the bracket ended up getting seeded through with their like 2-0 plus a no show or something like
Yeah.
that. But um, yeah. So last little thing here before we want to dive into what I think is going to end up being the meat of the takeaway from the Players Cup is changing of teams. So obviously, like you locked in a team for the first weekend, and that's carrying over at least into next weekend. I don't know. I honestly don't know whether or not you have to use it for the entire tournament or if it's just for these first 2 weekends or something. But do you feel like you would have liked to be able to change teams in between rounds, or do you feel like it makes sense to have them, stick you with the same team?
Absolutely. I wanted to change teams directly after I finished the third round. I was like, man, not that like my team felt clunky or whatever, but like I know the obvious holes in it. And then on top of that, when I saw the matchup in front of round 4, I was like, oh my god, like, I don't want to play with this team anymore. So it just, I just assumed that based on the structure, because it was per weekend, you're playing on weekends, that you'd be able to.
Yeah, I think I assumed that too.
Yeah, I definitely would like to, because the meta is, like, especially this season, is constantly shifting. And I watch a lot of content, whether that be replays or just people playing and stuff, and I'm like, man, I like that idea. I like that idea. And I can't even, there's no point in me even playing anything else because I have this specific team I need to play for the next 10 weeks.
Right, you have to make like a month and a half's worth of meta calls.
Well,
yeah, exactly.
I don't think that's entirely accurate. You have to, because everyone has to do that. It's like you don't have to have to predict what the meta will be in a month and a half when you're still using this team, because everyone's using a team they used or they locked in at the same time as you. Like, I agree that it's frustrating to like see a meta progress and still be locked to one team. Like, I fully agree with that. And I would enjoy using different teams in between rounds too, because I think, I will admit I'm probably a little bit biased in this, because when I won the major in 2015, I knew that's what you were going with this. I used 7 teams in the 7 weeks of Top Cut I played, and like that was one of my favorite parts of the tournament, is like prepping a team each week, and like even. This is like a buzzword, or at least it used to be, but I definitely did some counter teaming, and that was like really fun. But that's an entirely different discussion. I think personally I would enjoy using different teams, but I also like that's a lot more of a logistics issue when you're like talking about like submitting teams, and I guess technically it's like an accessibility thing. Like, some people have more access to Pokemon than others, and that might put some people at a disadvantage. And I don't.
Yeah, I think that could open up a huge bad can of worms with like people messing up team sheets and things of that sort. And like, it's less about me wanting to like counter team, because I really don't like the idea of counter teaming. For myself, like as a player, just because like I may not be that great with a team, just because it's good against somebody else. But I just like, in the sense of like trying out new ideas, while I'm in the mode of playing. If I'm not like in the mode of playing, I don't really care much. But for something this high stakes, like I would like to be constantly, evolving my mind around Pokemon, I guess.
Yeah, I think logistics is a fair argument. I feel like we have to kind of throw accessibility out at this point, because it's pretty clear that they've made a strong effort to make Pokemon like pretty accessible.
Right.
And if there's 2 weeks in between each round, like you have plenty of time. But as far as logistics go, I don't know. I feel like that's a good argument in some respects, but when you cut it down to just like 64 people and everything is handled online, I don't know. To me, it feels like it shouldn't be all that difficult to facilitate cutting down, or to facilitate, changing teams, especially because they're hosting streams, and this is like a big deal on the internet. And if you want to promote it, I feel like letting players use different Pokemon and be creative with their teams and things like that is something that TPCI should be wanting to foster. So the big discussion that I think everybody is having, and I think there's a lot to talk about in this regard, is open team sheets, which really feels like the piece of this tournament that has the potential to stick. It's something that people have been talking about for a long time, whether or not, like when you're playing Top Cut, you have to trade team sheets with your opponent. And it totally flips the way that we team build and play the game on its head, for better or for worse. So I guess I'll start out by thinking, and I think I asked you this question a couple days ago, Jeremy, whether or not you feel like open team sheets is a good or a bad idea.
For like, I'd say I'm 90% for it. Just based, I think it. The other 10% example, like most Zapdos in 2018 were running Heat Wave, right? They weren't running Protect and Roost, and I decided to run Detect and Hidden Power Ice for the Landers matchup. And that would have been a tech kind of thrown out completely out the window. In regards to my team, not out the window, but like, it wouldn't have been as a surprise. Like, I wouldn't been able to snipe as many Landers as I did, which would have been annoying. But at the same time, the 90% of of me that likes it is the fact I was able to make so many more safer plays, knowing that games are locked down if I just made this play because this Pokemon can't protect, or I know it doesn't have this coverage move, or something in that sense. It made me be able to I don't know, just cut down the room for error.
Yeah, I feel like that feels like the crux of the argument, and a lot of people that are like, quote unquote team building purists, where like all of their teams have like these, nuanced matchups and are like somewhat reliant on having this tech that players are, either not aware of or not prepared for, is like, I guess a big part of the argument. I think I kind of agree with you that I'm still a little bit on the fence, just because I've historically been somebody that I wouldn't call myself like a snowflake, but have tended to use teams that are a little bit like, not all that meta, and take advantage of, like knowledge gaps, and, this Pokemon gets this move. So it kind of changes the way that you have to approach team building and playing when all of your cards are already on the table.
I agree.
Right.
I also have been, I would put myself in a similar boat to you, Brendan, where I like using like, so my favorite thing to do is like take common Pokemon and use them in like different ways. Not like different ways, but like in ways that aren't exactly what you would expect just on the surface. Like I think the best example for me is my 2018 Nats team, where I had like 6 like standard Pokemon. I guess I don't know if you call it Gardevoir standard, but like the mons themselves were like not crazy, but like half of them had sets that were just ridiculous. like not anything you ever would have guessed at team preview, and like that's kind of how I enjoy like building and playing, and that definitely like it definitely takes away from that kind of like building and or playing style. But I think building a team that doesn't solely rely on information like gaps is really important anyway. And I also in terms of information gaps, like the people that and the information that they have access to that they're willing to share is also a really big deal in Pokemon, whether it be online tournaments or in person. And I think
having friends is busted. We all know.
Yeah,
that.
Exactly. And I think eliminating that as a variable is, generally speaking, a good thing. Like even as someone that is probably above average in terms of like access to information based on people that I know or could ask.
Weird flex.
Yeah, I'm just like really popular. No, but I do think that like eliminating that as a variable is a good thing, and I think that kind of creates a more like pure environment as far as like whoever plays better in a game wins. Like if that is your goal for any given match, then that does contribute to that.
Yeah, I remember seeing some tweets from Ben Grismer. He's somebody like I guess that he would lean more towards your style of team building, where but probably on a way further on the end of the spectrum. He builds like extremely well against what's meta. Like I tend to play something that's more meta, and like every time I play them, I'm like, oh my god, like I don't know what to do against this.
Jeremy's been Flygoned one too many times.
Oh my dude, you have no idea. Bringing like Flygon against Scarf Flygon against Garchomp, Coco, Arcanine, like it wasn't a good time. Like,
oh no,
you don't know the things that I've had to deal with. So it's a nightmare, honestly. And like I could imagine somebody like him who's like, man, like the way I play is, the way I like to build is against what people like to use.
Yeah.
And if a lot of my techs are kind of blown immediately, then it kind of cuts down. I guess I don't want to say how good he is because he's a really good player, but like it like takes away that like an advantage that he has,
right?
When he goes to play.
Well, and there are ways to build anti-meta without relying on like random like unseen text too. And I don't think it would single-handedly like kill players like that at all. It like you're definitely right in that. I think it kind of takes away some of their edge, but I think in time people would adapt to it.
And I've heard a lot of people say that they feel like having team sheets available is also going to be a factor in like metas necessarily being more centralized. Do you feel like that's true as well?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I really don't know, man. I couldn't say.
Yeah, I don't know either, because like I could see both arguments. Like if you're playing knowing that team sheets will be available, like let's say for the year 2021, every tournament has team sheets available to everyone during the tournament. Like There are probably more people that will opt for more standard things, but I don't think everyone would. And
Hmm.
like I said, I think there are absolutely ways to beat standard without relying on, oh, I just sniped you with Scarf Celesteela or something stupid like that. Like there are certainly ways to beat what's popular without it being weird, for lack of
Yeah.
a better word.
Also, even if you know what the sets are, if a team like is well prepared against what is standard, it's gonna have, whether you know what the techs are or not, it's gonna have an advantage immediately
Yeah,
already,
yeah,
just
exactly.
because the person prepped for it. But I don't know. At the end of the day, I'm still going to, whether somebody knows what I have or not. That's kind of the reason why I chose something that was kind of standard-ish, because I have good matchups across the board, essentially, right? That's the idea of it.
Hmm.
Hmm. So that was going to be kind of my next question, was like, as far as the way that you're preparing for this tournament, and I guess theoretically how you might prepare for a tournament if we were to be in an open team sheet world. Like, what does your preparation look differently? And I guess especially at this point in the tournament, where you have like a whole week to study your opponent's pace right now, or 2 weeks or whatever it is.
Um, okay, so I guess the first part of it, like for me, I'm still going to use whatever clicks for me. I'm not. It's not going to change
Hmm.
anything I do. Um, if I'm good with a team, I'm good with a team, and I'm not going to kind of deviate from that. I'm not going to build specifically because I know my opponent will know what I'm running.
Hmm.
But as far as the whole week to marinate on someone else's team, it's a little annoying. Just because, let's say whether you win or lose, you still have another one or two to go. Um, and you don't get as much time, I guess, to. I don't know. I guess the waiting process is just like grueling. Like you just want to play immediately. You
Yeah.
want to play
Right.
already. And that for Pokemon tournaments, I don't know about you guys, but I get extremely anxious
Yep.
beforehand. The nerves just like kick in, and like
Yeah.
having to feel that all week has just been a lot. But
Right.
um, it is good to also be able to prep, for that week, and just kind of know what to expect, and treat it kind of a game plan, and go from there.
Yeah, I do think that part of it is kind of awkward. Like, obviously, this is not an issue you would have at a live event, other than like prepping for Top Cut overnight. But we already do that anyway. Like by the end of Swiss, we all know who's using what, and everyone starts prepping for their Top Cut matches. So that's not really a difference. But like having an entire week, I think is like, I think that's more of a consequence of the tournament structure than of open team sheets in general. Just because they decided to put the rounds weeks apart, and so just kind of how it is. Like I agree though.
Hmm.
Like
Right.
if I was playing in Players Cup and I qualified for the second weekend, and I already knew the matchup, I would be like thinking about it every day, all the time, and it
It's
would just be
killing me.
terrible. I bet. Yeah. Like I can't even imagine. I'm also like
Hang in there.
prone to tournament anxiety, just regular anxiety, but that's not the point. But yeah, like it would be hard for me to like not think about it at any given time, and so I like
Right.
I think that's just an unfortunate coincidence.
Yep. Yeah, I think I agree. So if they were to go ahead and implement team sheet sharing in a live tournament setting, what do you think would be the best way to do it? Like only top cuts at large events, through Swiss and top cut at large events, all events. So you're going to be seeing like team sheets at PCs and stuff like that. Like, do you think it's something that should be reserved for higher levels of play, or should they just kind of like drop the team sheet bomb?
I think that they should. Firstly, I think they should ease into this, because I mean they're kind of doing it now, because this is the online tournament, and there's nobody on the line, and uh, we're also kind of just desperate to play at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So
Hmm.
we're gonna play no matter what. But I think they should do regional plus events for top cut. They should try. They should start there for top 8
Hmm.
slash top 16, or whatever how many people end up the kicker is. Those top cut players should have access to each other's team sheets, and then build off of that. See how it goes. See how people react. See what the feedback is, and go from there.
Hmm.
I think one question is how would they implement it? Like, especially if you're doing it for all of Swiss at a tournament, like, do you do it online like the different Players Cup? And if so, do you allow people to view them during the matches? And if you do that, like, how do you keep people from doing other things on their phones or whatever device? Do you do it all on paper and like force people to turn them in after each round, which prevents any interference from phones or like looking up things on damage calcs or whatever on your phone? But like people will lose those team sheets. Like there will not be 100% return rate on those sheets. So do you print out like 8 copies of everything? Like I don't know what the best way to do that would be. For Swiss specifically, if you're doing it in Top Gun, it's really easy to just watch all the matches and grab them when they're done.
I'm just thinking about how funny it would be if they actually just like went ahead and turned over like the team sheets that we have in their current iteration to like everybody, and everybody has to memorize, like stat numbers at level 69 and stuff like that. Trying to figure out. Somebody's using a level 1 Arcanine, and you got to figure out where the stat allocations are.
Yeah, no one would ever leave their Mons at level 50 or like even 100.
Like everybody trying to figure out how the hell you can game the system the best.
Oh my god! Well, see, that's the problem. Like you were saying, how are they going to implement this, and how do they, how are they going to distribute them during like a round of Swiss?
Yeah.
I think that's a little bit much right now.
Mm-hmm.
And with Top Cut, you're able to say, okay. Here's your opponent, for the next day, and this is what they're running, etc. And then, you don't have to worry about people, peeking at the sheet during the set or something like that.
Yeah.
Try to go about it that way and see where it goes.
Yeah, it seems almost like they have to have like a program specifically designed to set up something like that. But again, we're all in just kind of a hypothetical scenario now, so we don't have to lose sleep over it just yet. So just to change gears a little bit, Jeremy. So you're somebody at this point that's a player that's like pretty decorated, I would say, in comparison to a bunch of other players.
Uh-huh.
What would like a good placement or winning this event, like where would it place in your trophy case alongside like your other finishes? Like is this a tournament that feels really prestigious? That it would be up there, like with a day 2 Worlds or an open championship, which is a huge trophy, or is it something that you don't really like even put in the same category as a live event?
For me, I think whoever wins this, like put it like this, the Wolf and A Drive Tour, Fevzi won a lot of money, but he didn't get a trophy, nothing like that. But that was a huge deal.
Yeah.
Like that was 1,500 plus people, whatever it was, and super amount, like tons of respect for. And I guess I think of it in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Even though there's no money on the line, like this is TPCI, like a ton of kids are gonna be watching. People are gonna know your name after this. You're gonna go from nobody. I guess you could go from like just your first tournament to everybody knowing who John Doe is immediately. So I would love it. Like it would mean a lot to me. It'd probably be definitely my most proud moment as a BTC player.
So it's pretty highly for you. I was actually gonna ask how you feel like this would be compared with a Champions Cup win, but I guess you kind of answered that. So it definitely is. It's not a world championship, right? Some people are calling this mini worlds, and I think that's kind of doing worlds an injustice.
Yeah.
But it's definitely up there with some of the other like regional level placements for you.
Yeah, above it, because I mean, Fevzi. Everybody knows Fevzi in as far as
Fevzi's the GOAT.
The people who are like involved in BGC, but like you have like kids who like do shiny hunting. It's like, oh yeah, that's the kid who won the Players Cup.
Uh-huh.
I mean, the Champions Cup, whatever it was called. They otherwise would never had any idea who he was.
Right.
I don't know how it stuck
so,
up for me, like personally. It's tough because like I haven't won anything in person,
yeah.
So I don't really have anything. Oh, I might go win a PC, but that's like nothing. So like I don't really have anything to compare it to, like winning a DC Open or a regional or something like that. But like for me, like I think the two things I'm proudest of in Pokemon are the major and my 2018 nationals, which I think it was like 12th or something like that. But I was like, obviously the major was big. That was a big moment for me. But even 2018 nationals, I think I hold that one in higher regard just because of the 3 years prior of me like coming close and like falling flat at the last minute. So that might be a little bit inflated. It's hard to compare stuff like this unless you already know the feeling and like both scenarios, which very few people do. So like, it's all personal too. Like, if you winning an online tournament is something that you're incredibly proud of, then that's awesome. Like, congrats, you deserve to be happy for it. If you win it and you just kind of consider it some other thing you did on the weekend, like, I mean, that's fine too. we don't all have to share the same like weight for these things, I think.
Right. So last question for you, Jeremy.
Mm-hmm.
I know you are a big fan of Ray Rizzo, and unfortunately, last weekend we found out that Ray Rizzo, despite qualifying, was going to be unable to play in the Players' Cup, unfortunately. Now, you have an in-game name that is an homage to Mr. Rizzo. Now, do you feel like you are really shouldering the load of his legacy at this point in time?
Dude, me and Ray are like, we're binded somehow or another. like we're on the same mental wavelength. I'm channeling him for this weekend.
Separated at birth.
Like, personally, I'm kind of anticipating my round 4 not going too well, but then I have to win 3 straight, kind of like he did. So it's no big deal. I can do that, right?
Yeah, you're just channeling him. You've connected with him on a metaphysical level.
Exactly. This was meant to be.
3 in a row. Let's get it. You won 3 in a row last weekend, right? So there you go. You're off to a good start.
Absolutely.
Man, it's a bummer he couldn't play though. I was really looking forward to that.
That'd been cool.
All the time Aaron Trailer is just like, even though Ray's not playing, he can step back and win events anytime he wants to, right? Like everybody knows that, right?
and to make it even worse, he teased this for the last few weeks.
I know.
Yeah, dude.
Like, hey, I have a surprise. And then, like, weeks go by, and I'm like, hey, what happened? Like, he said, I'm going to tell you tomorrow. I'm like, okay. Weeks go by, and then he never, I was like, hey, what happened to that surprise? He just was being short. He's like, I don't know. I'm like, what the heck? What do you mean? And then he just drops a bomb on me. He's like, Ray's doing this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. He qualified. I was like, oh, let's go. I was like super happy about it. So,
yeah, he loves the troll. Ray's the GOAT though. Indisputable. All right, so that's going to wrap up at least our Pokemon discussion for this week, and we're going to go ahead and change gears just a little bit. So anybody that listened to our episode from 2 weeks ago, we spent quite a bit of time talking with Gabby and Chalky about, a lot of the social justice causes that are being kind of publicized in the community and on the internet and across the world right now, and talked a lot about, the ways that our listeners hopefully could, be allies to members of marginalized groups, or just, ways that you can kind of be a good person with respect to some of the people that don't have it, necessarily as good as you might. So Jeremy, as a black person in the VGC community, we kind of wanted to give you the opportunity to maybe talk about, some of your experiences, whether they be racist or things of that ilk, and then whether or not there's anything, that you could recommend as far as being an ally.
This is may seem very obvious, but I've been black my whole life, and
what?
And like when this first started, the Black Lives Matter movement, really kind of struck a chord with me around 2013, 2014. I went through this was before I ever played Pokemon, and it was huge on Twitter, and it felt like I was like kind of the only one going through it. It was like, man, at that moment, like I feel like all of my friends, my non-black friends, had kind of abandoned me. And when I got to the Pokemon community, like that started to kind of wind down like a little bit, but it was still pretty serious. But then I got in the community, nobody was talking about it at all.
Yeah,
and it was kind of shocking. It was like everything's about Pokemon all times of the day. And I'm a part of a sneaker community as well, and I interact with them on Twitter as well, and that's all we talk about. It's a huge thing. It's our existence. There's everybody in that community, in the sneaker community, is black, white, Asian, and we're all pretty much on the same page. And so when social justice issues did come up, and I didn't see them, Pokemon being talked about, I was like, man, this might be. Maybe I kind of have to muzzle myself a little bit. Maybe I have to, change up my content, or maybe the way I act around certain people. And that can be really, really damaging, to your mental health.
Yep.
And also, just between friends, because maybe the person you hold as like a really good friend doesn't know who you are. And so when the George Floyd situation happened, like it was really pleasing to see a shift that happened. It was like we went from literally never talking about it, and then also, let me just put it like this: there was I had some pretty bad instances that I had to defend friends, or I got a lot of backlash from it, and it was really disheartening. So to see that shift, I was really happy about it. I think a lot of people felt that pressure to, it's either you're gonna get with it or get lost, essentially. Mm-hmm. And so it was, like I said, I was happy to see that, and maybe people decided that it's time for change finally, within their friend groups, and
Right, and I think I remember talking to you a little bit at the time, and one of the things you said to me is just like, this can't be like a one-time thing, and we're only talking about it, because it's popular and everybody, thinks Black Lives Matter because it's popular on Twitter right now. Mm-hmm. So like in that regard, and I guess, going forward, is there anything that you would like to see, or anything that we can do to continue to be allies to the cause, even when it's not the only thing on Twitter?
Right. Like I said, a lot of times people change because of the pressure that they feel, and that's fine. As long as the change is genuine, and I think it's important just to acknowledge other people's feelings. Whether, in my case, being Black, acknowledge other people's feelings. Ask questions. Want to genuinely know. Not ask questions just to respond with with your rebuttal. For a lot of our existence, Black people have been gaslit, mm-hmm. and made to feel like the things that they feel aren't legitimate. And so I think that just being able to make sure that your friend is mentally stable and mentally okay, know that they don't have the same experience as you in America. They may view certain memorabilia of America differently. They may view certain American heroes differently. And don't be shocked when they tell you that. Yeah. Or you can be shocked, but understand where they're coming from. And ask questions like why is that? And be genuine about it. That's pretty much it, man. Just make sure you're being a good person, and making sure that you're not. I don't know. Just also don't over cater. Please don't do that. It makes me feel like I'm like, I don't know, some kind of charity job or something. Yeah. But just be genuine in your actions at the end of the day.
Good advice.
Yeah, we always like to think that maybe like being a good person as advice shouldn't have to continually be said, but some of the stuff that's been going on lately always makes you scratch your head a little bit. So thanks for that. I think that's super good advice that everybody should follow. All right, so we're gonna change gears one more time, Anya, and I think Jake, you want to do your segment here?
Oh, are we doing that?
Do you want to?
Yeah. So okay, at the end of each podcast, we usually do like music recommendations, and I believe that Brendan neglected to tell you this.
So I'm not a good.
This is me throwing Brendan under the bus.
I'm not gonna get to do that anymore.
No, but basically, like anything you've been listening to or just want to shout out at the time. I am not ready for this either because I thought we weren't doing it. But
you're on the spot.
Oh no! I've been listening to a lot of Mr. Wives lately because their new album comes out next week, and I am very heavily anticipating it. I think I don't really know. I don't really have a good one. I'm sorry.
Okay, I got one. I've been trying I really like. I guess my guilty pleasure, you could say, is funk music. It's not really guilty pleasure, but it's just something I've been trying to get more heavily into. Mm-hmm. And I've been listening to Purple Rain by Prince.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And 1984, bringing it back a little bit. But it's different. It's definitely different. I can say that much. Like, obviously, most of the songs you know about, but there's songs on there that I've never heard before, and I'm gonna try my best to listen to most of his discography because one of the goats. It's a shame I haven't listened to more of it.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Yeah,
Actually,
he is a goat and extremely influential too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Extremely,
mean,
yeah.
I've definitely listened to. I feel like most of it before, but like not to a point where I've sat down and actually like listened to it. You know, it's like it's been on in the car, but it's not the same as like actually like doing your due diligence as far as like he's the goat, like so influential, dude.
Absolutely.
As far as like modern pop music and pop music back in the 80s and 90s, it's
Mm-hmm.
unbelievable. People don't even realize it. Um, I've been listening to like all Avicii this week. I like a rip to Avicii, but like even that is like very in a different way influential to a lot of more like synth pop techno stuff.
Mhm.
Like he was kind of like ahead of it being popular when Levels came out, and then he had some of those other songs.
Yeah.
So that's some good stuff there as well.
I came up with a better
Yeah.
answer too.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, if you want to talk about that, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, he just like brings me back to college. Like, I used to work at a radio
Yeah,
station
dude.
in Vermont, and for my internship, and like we constantly played him. So that brings me right back to 2013, like 2014.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can like picture like that. Like, you ever have like you listen to a song or like you smell something and it like takes you to a place?
Yes.
Like, I feel like I remember the very first time that I listened to Levels.
For me, that song
That's
is
crazy.
Stitches by Shawn Mendes. Because there was a summer I worked at a water park hotel meant for like families and stuff, and I worked in an area with like an arcade and like some family themed retail stuff, and they like only played Radio Disney. That is the only thing they played. And Radio Disney played like the same 8 songs every hour without fail. And Stitches was one of those songs. So anytime I hear that song, I see myself in the basement of the Great Wolf Lodge in Grapevine, Texas,
Oh my god!
telling
I hate
kids
that for you.
to stop like looking the arcade games or whatever.
Society has progressed beyond the need for Radio Disney. Let's just put it that way.
Okay, the other answer I came up with was the Hamilton soundtrack.
Okay.
We all know that came out on Disney Plus this month, and I know I'm like kind of behind the curve because as someone who is a self-professed musical theater lover, I hadn't actually listened to the full soundtrack until it came
we
out.
hate that for you too.
The reason is I like seeing shows before I listen to like the entire soundtrack, and I hadn't like seen it, but now that I have seen it on Disney Plus, I have listened to it a lot, and it's really good.
All right, well you're catching
I
up.
know.
And you were doing your research while we were talking there, weren't you?
No.
Level of-
I definitely
level
don't
of
have
preparation
Spotify
for
open in
this
front of
podcast.
me.
Unbelievable. All right. So that's gonna wrap up our second segment for this week. So again, a big thanks to Jeremy for coming on to the show this week. We got 2 very different gears, but awesome stuff from him on both. And glad we could finally make you getting onto the podcast happen, Jeremy.
Let's do it. Thank you so much.
All right. So Jake and I are gonna take a short break, and we will be right back in just a few seconds. So stick with us. Welcome back, everyone, and thanks for stopping by our podcast this week. We're happy to get back onto our 2-week track, and hopefully we'll be able to sustain it. Although honestly, I honestly can't make any promises. We're gonna do our best, but there's just like there's a lot going on. Jake's got a lot going on. Work is hard, and even just like the stuff going on in Pokemon is very sporadic.
Yeah.
So if you want to hear my voice, you can definitely tune in to the Pokecasters Network tournament next weekend, which I will be casting. If you want to hear Jake's, we'll put his Discord information in
You can
the
call me at
description.
407. What if I just dox myself on my own podcast?
Like on your own podcast. Anyway, thanks for coming by. As always, you can find us at Soundproof Cast, and you can find me at MrBDog46VGC. You can find Jake at Major Bowman _, and then of course, if you're listening to our podcast, you can find our podcast wherever you usually get your podcasts. And then I believe we'll put links into some of the tournaments that are going on.
Yeah, everything we talked about I'll have linked in the
Jake
description.
usually does that. I don't really.
You,
Jake just does
quote,
all the
usually.
things. Jake just does all the things, always. Anyway, so that's going to do it for us. Thanks again for coming by. We'll be back hopefully in 2 weeks with episode 23. And hopefully we'll see you then.